Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à les Jeux olympiques du monde. Je m'appelle Rebecca et je suis votre hôte pour aujourd'hui. Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the Sales Olympics. That was my sad attempt at French. We are going to kick off into an incredible topic today, but I hope that everyone was watching yesterday, as yesterday was day 1 of the Olympics. So it's the second official day of competition. So I actually got to go to swimming last night and saw the 4x100 relay for the male and female. And then I saw a whole bunch of different events, but it's absolutely incredible to see people swimming front row, center, see them digging into their competition. So without further ado, I know that it's Sunday. Thanks so much to everyone for joining me. We're going to go ahead and jump into the topic for today. Very fun topic, very important topic, at least in my opinion, to the only 2 things that you can find on cold call, cold email, or discovery call that actually closes deals and makes your buyer know that you have value and can add value to the conversation. So why don't we go ahead and jump into lap 1. So lap 1 is going to be centered around, the one at the bottom is not correct. It says, what's a lagging indicator? See, here's a great example. So the real topic is an unknown. This is actually a great example. So I'd imagine that we didn't know beforehand that the question from yesterday is up for today. And we're unfortunately having to run into that right now. Oh, now it's changed. We're having to run into that right now. It's actually the perfect example, parfait exemple, of something that I didn't know was going to happen basically on the show. So everyone is waiting for their buyer to already run into pain before they come in and rush in to solve it. But where you can really add value to a buyer is to catch an unknown, catch something that they didn't know that's going to become a problem or is currently a problem that will have impact in the future to them. So if we had known that was gonna pop up beforehand, we would have changed it, but we didn't. So this is where a seller really needs to live, eat, and breathe, is how do I find things that the buyer doesn't know about in the conversation of the role? So there's a number of different examples that come to mind, but most of the questions that are usually being asked by sellers are on the way to pain. And pain is a subjective criteria that is always diagnosed by the patient first. So the only value that you can enter into the conversation is to find something that the buyer didn't know. Now, this is going to do 2 things primarily, and we're going to go into a couple of things of what you can find and how you can find it, but it's going to propel your buyer into motion. So Newton's first law, for anyone who's nerdy out there, if you want to give me a shout out in the chat, if you're a nerd, Newton's first law is an object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest. So you have to keep in mind that your buyer, if you're going outbound, is at rest. Meaning based on what they know already, either the pain isn't big enough or the impact isn't big enough or the problem isn't big enough for them to actually do something about it. So there's a difference between a pain and a problem. A pain is any negative experience, and a problem is anything you're going to solve or solve for. And you're going to solve for something based on one of 2 things: how egregious the pain is, or the depth of the impact that becomes true if they don't solve for it. So if you're going outbound, I mean, it's no big secret, but outbound, some might say, I might say, is broken. Meaning we have a 15 to 25% open rate. We have a 0.5 to 0.7 reply rate. And if I had to guess why, it's because people don't understand when they're prospecting into someone that they're prospecting based on pain. So they'll send messages like, we work with people who struggle with. And if that person can identify into that group, they're like, oh, I struggle with blank. You have to keep in mind that you're going to outbound. So you're going to people who, by definition, if the pain was already big enough, or the pain was already big enough, or the impact was already big enough based on what they know, they would have actually done something about it. So what you have to do with an unknown, there's two things that really come from it. But the first is that when you find an unknown for your buyer, then you actually help them. They didn't know on the back end that lagging indicator was going to come up on lap one. So that's one you could have caught. And when you catch something like that, you build credibility and you show your buyer that basically you're on their side. They want to solve problems. You also want to solve problems. But the other really nice thing, from a sales perspective, is you can create new buyer intent out of thin air. So if I have, 60 seconds with someone, 15 minutes with someone, 20 minutes with someone, the entire time should be anchored around how many unknowns can I find in that conversation that they believe that aren't true or they have missed entirely that I can bring to light for them, regardless of whether they buy or not. At least at that point, So based on what they believed before, they weren't willing to do something about it. But now, based on what you found, because you found an impact that they didn't know, it will mobilize them to buy. So they were at rest. They were at a state of complete rest. They're like, this problem isn't big enough. This pain isn't big enough. This impact isn't big enough. But you find something new and you mobilize them into a state of motion. So I'm going to give an example here. I have terrible teeth. And what I mean by that is I was born without enamel on my teeth. So from a very young age, I was in the dentist chair a lot. So I had upwards of 17 fillings, I think it was actually 19 fillings as a young girl. I've had crowns put in, I've had them replaced, and a second time, and I'm only 38. So what that meant to Becc was, a little Becc, is I was like, I'm in Texas, so I'm going to brush the demons off my teeth. So I brushed 5 times a day and hard. And they always talked to me about getting an electric toothbrush. You need to get an electric toothbrush. You need to get an electric toothbrush. And I always said, no, 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 no. And one of the experiences in specific, I was getting basically a cavity filled, and they didn't hit the numbing correctly. So I flagged the play, and I'm like, this still hurts. They go through it, and they do the entire surgery without any Novocaine. I can still, to this day, hear the sound of that drill in my head for PTSD. So they were trying to sell me this electric toothbrush. You need to get one. You need to get one. You need to get one. And I never said yes until this most recent time. The hygienist said, I know that you need to get one, but let me show you why. Here are your gums. Here are your gums over time. You have brushed so hard that if you continue brushing in this manner, you will have no gums in your 40s. And once they're gone, they're gone. So we can do one of two things. I'm going to hit the timer. We can do one of two things if that happens. We can either A, graft some gum off of the roof of your mouth, and we can put it around your teeth. Or number 2, B, we can get gums from somebody else's mouth and put them in your mouth once those gums are gone. So I'm like on the verge of tears. And I said, is there any other option? And she said, yes, you can buy an electric toothbrush that you don't brush that hard. So I bought an electric toothbrush that night because she found something that I didn't know. Based on what I did know, I didn't want the toothbrush. But what I found out later was I still didn't want this toothbrush. But what I wanted less was to have no gums in my 40s and have to go through that surgery. We're going to go into lap 2, but I want anyone who's watching right now to jump in the chat. I want you to see if anyone can guess why. Why did I not want to buy that electric toothbrush? There's a multitude of reasons and things that your buyer has to get used to, but I want to see if anyone can guess the reasoning behind why I didn't want to buy that electric toothbrush. So why don't we go ahead and kick into lap 2, and we'll see if anyone can get it in the chat. The question is, why did I not want to buy that electric toothbrush? So let's go ahead and go into lap 2. So lap 2, about lap 2 about the things that you can find on a call with your buyer. Here's another unknown. It still says leading indicator. Oh, there we go. Now it's right. The first type of thing that you can find that will add value to your buyer's world and make them buy is going to be a misdiagnosis. So a misdiagnosis is something that your buyer believes that is not true. That if they operate on this information, it will hurt them. So I want you to imagine for a second, that I believe that gravity is not real, for instance. And I'm going to go and, walk off a plank, believing that gravity is not real. So this is a belief by your buyer that is inaccurate. So there's a number of things that they can misdiagnose. But the statistic is, okay, we got an answer here from Dean. He said, because the pain to get new gums was stronger than the pain of the sound of the drill. Actually, Dean, I was like, oh, he didn't get it until the end. Dean realized that was brilliant, Dean. The first half is true. The second half is where he won me. What I was trying to avoid was not, oh, I got to buy a new toothbrush and learn a process that's new. What Dean brilliantly said, I have goosebumps, is I was scared of the sound of the drill. So I was 9, 10 years old in a room by myself. It's a pretty scary experience for a little girl to go through. They're operating on my teeth. They're drilling into me and I can feel everything. So the sound of that drill triggered me. It still does. But to his point, what triggers me even more is the idea that I'm going to have to pull gums off the top of my mouth and go through an incredibly painful 3-month process of grafting them back into my teeth. So he nailed it. It was the sound of the drill. That's what was bothering me. That's why I didn't want to buy that voodoo toothbrush. And it is still painful. Every single time that I turn on that drill, I jump. I'm like, okay, it's okay. It's okay. No one's here to drill your head off. Okay, you're going to be okay. It's just like we did yesterday. I literally go through that process every single time I brush my teeth now. But it's less painful than having to get new gums. So misdiagnosis, this is the first piece that you can find. What she actually found was the second thing, which we're going to go into in a minute. But a misdiagnosis, same piece of type of value, is something they believe that's not true. So I believed that if I were to go on as is, I'd be just fine. Or let's say that I believe as a buyer that the root cause of my missing my SQL number is the quality of my email. And actually, it has nothing to do with the quality of my email. It has to do with the fact that I'm blacklisted and none of my emails are getting delivered. I believe, that there's a number of different categories. There's a business problem, tactical problem, root cause, current impact, current persona impact, current horizontal impact, current vertical impact, future horizontal impact, future persona impact, future vertical impact. There are a number of different things that you can find, but this is going to be something that the buyer believes is not true. So I'll give you another example. My sister, actually, oddly enough, is a doctor. And I came home one day and I said, hey, so I have stomach ulcers, I think. I was back in Texas. She goes, okay, walk me through why you think that it's stomach ulcers. I said, oh, well, I think it's caused from stress. I've had a lot of workload recently and blah, blah, blah. And when I was in school, I got stomach ulcers too, and that was a high peak of stress. So then she asked me another question, which was very interesting. She said, do you still drink a lot of caffeine? I said, yes, I do. She's like, do you still drink Americanos in the morning? I said, yes, I do. She said, do you still drink Diet Monsters for lunch? I said, yes, I do. She said, do you still drink a Diet Coke at night sometimes? I said, every once in a while. Everyone's getting a real feel for my caffeine intake right now. And she said, okay, that's really interesting. Can you describe the pain? I said, well, it's all of a sudden it happens in my stomach. And she goes, and it's still going with all those beverages. I said, yes. And how she blew up my assumption was very interesting. She said, did you know that there are actually no medical studies that link stress to stomach ulcers? And I corrected myself. I said, oh, it's the caffeine. She said, correct. The thing that I needed to change to alleviate the stomach ulcers was the root cause of caffeine intake, not workload. So the misdiagnosis that I had made was that it was workload. So if someone has a misdiagnosis, there are two things about this that are important. Number one, it's not because they want to. It's because they aren't the expert. So where you can add expertise as a seller is finding something that they believe that's dangerous if they operate on that assumption. So the second thing to this is where you build credibility, right? So if I'm operating on the assumption that it's one root cause and then I change that leading indicator, and it doesn't absolve my problem, I'm in a worse spot. I have less resources, less credibility internally, and less time to actually do something about it before this impending doom of this impact happens. So what I'm after in that room is how many misdiagnoses can I find that the buyer believes that's not true, that would hurt them if they continued to believe this. So I'm going to say this in a quip. There was someone who came out to Paris and I didn't know. And I met them on a discovery call a couple months later. And I said, well, nice to meet you. There was 10 other competitors in this deal. I said, nice to meet you. And she goes, we've actually already met. And I tried to reach out to you when I was in Paris, but you never responded. I knew I was on the back foot. So I knew within 20 minutes, I had to find as many misdiagnoses to win that sale that she didn't know beforehand that would hurt her. That's lap 2. So in summary, and then we're going to go into lap 3. The first is level set is your job as a seller, as a prospector in discovery, et cetera, is to find an unknown. And lap 2 was a specific type of unknown, which is a misdiagnosis, something that your buyer believes that is not correct about their situation. So let's go ahead into lap 3. The other piece of value that you can find is what's called a misdiagnosis. Hey, look at that. We got it right this time. Good job. Is a misdiagnosis. So a misdiagnosis, the first one, a misdiagnosis is something you believe, that your buyer believes, that is not correct. A misdiagnosis is something that they've missed entirely. So I went to a number of different doctor's appointments to prepare for this material. And at one point I asked one of the doctors, he said, so what's wrong with you? Why are you here today? And I was like, what's wrong with me is a whole other ball of wax. I'm here today to ask you questions about how you ask questions. He was like, oh boy. And I said, when people come in to see you, why do they come in? He said 99.9% of the time it's because of pain. I'm like, got it. So when they come in, how often have they self-diagnosed? And he was like, think WebMD, 95 to 98% of the time. And I was like, okay, so 95 to 98% of the time they come in with a belief. I said, my last question is, how often are they wrong of what they believe? And he said, can I be real with you? 90% of the time, they were inaccurate about what they believed about themselves. So when I'm trying to find either one of these, a misdiagnosis or a misdiagnosis, I don't ask them, do you have an email deliverability problem? I don't send them emails that say, we work with people who struggle with email deliverability. I ask them a question about an indicator that helps me understand that they have a problem when they didn't understand that they had a problem. So in this example, I would say, what's your email open rate? So industry average is 15 to 25. And let's say they say, a very common answer is around 18 to 23%. So we go into, sales engagement and they're like, it's 18%. If you have anything less than a 50% open rate, you have an email deliverability problem, period. So I don't ask them, do you have an email deliverability problem? If they knew and they were correct. There was no need for the seller. So a very sobering stat is 87% of the time, buyers do not want a seller involved. And if I had to guess why, it's because they have no expertise in their experience and don't add anything to the conversation that they didn't know beforehand. There's usually only one thing that the seller knows that the buyer doesn't know, and that the buyer believes that the seller knows. And so they ask for it right off the bat in discovery. I want to see if anyone in the chat can guess what it is. So this is something that the seller knows, the buyer doesn't know, and the buyer believes is the only thing that the seller knows that they don't know. So they ask for it right away in discovery. Let's see if anyone can guess it in the chat. We'll keep going. But when I'm after in that room, what I was after with that person who came in is, from a likability perspective, I am a 0 out of 10. There was 10 other competitors in that deal. I knew that based on a likability scale, if I were to try to build rapport on a relationship, I've lost. I'm starting behind everyone because I didn't even respond to this person when they came out to Paris. But I wanted to find so many unknowns for this person that it would be almost irresponsible of them to go with anyone else. So what your buyer's fighting in their brain is, yes, we got it, pricing. That is the only thing that your buyer believes that you know as a seller. So they ask for it right off the bat. So my push here is that if you are on the sales floor, that you are after, with your line of questioning, finding either a misdiagnosis, something they believe that's not true, or a missed diagnosis, something that they have missed entirely. So email deliverability is a great example. And when I find the email deliverability thing, if you have less than 50% open rate, you have an email deliverability problem. The reason most people don't do anything about it is because most people don't know it. So I don't come in and say, do you have an email deliverability problem? I say, what's your open rate? Another example is the worst time statistically to send emails and make calls is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., specifically Monday and Tuesday. And that's when most reps make them. The best time to send emails from an engagement perspective, reply rate perspective, book meeting perspective, and for calls, call length, booked meeting, etc., is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So what the buyers have missed in this equation is, one of the reasons that they're missing quota is because they're making all of their dials Monday and Tuesday morning. So the priority that they have to be is 15 times more of a priority than what the buyer currently has going on a Monday morning when their email inbox is flooded. So misdiagnosis of the equation is, yes, they're behind on quota, and yes, email quality is a piece of it. But one of the things that they've missed is it's also the time of day that they're calling in. Another misdiagnosis. So the teeth example, that's an example of a misdiagnosis. I had missed an impact that would happen to me if I stayed at it as is. A good litmus test to this, or a good push here, is that teeth example was not based on pain. I had no pain in the present. So if they said, we work with people who struggle with gum erosion, I would have said, that's not me, until she found the misdiagnosis of what was going on with my gums. Another example is demo request process. The lowest that I've seen of people who request a demo, who actually receive a first discovery call with an AE, the lowest I've seen is 4%. The highest, it was a statistical outlier, was 22.5%. The average is 9, meaning 9% of people who raise their hand asking to see your product actually just get a first meeting with an AE. So everyone misses it because of the process. Meaning, if you're round robining, if they request a demo on the weekend and you follow up on Monday, if you change it to a different channel, if you email and don't let them book on the site, very likely that the average is 9% of people are actually getting a first call. So there's forward misdiagnosis, but this lab summary is, if you find a misdiagnosis or you find a misdiagnosis, that is where you help your buyer. That is where you show your value. And that is where you create or solidify their trust in you, that if you found something like this, you have an expertise that they don't have, that they want around. Okay, let's go into lap 4. What all this stuff and why does it matter? So value is in the eye of the beholder. So I hear a lot of people talk about you need to add value, you need to add value, you need to add value. But I never hear it defined. We're going to define value as something that they didn't know or something that they didn't have beforehand. Most sellers that I know, the route that they pursue, or prospectors, the route that they pursue is, yeah, I have a piece of information that they didn't know about beforehand, the information about my product. So I'm going to tell them all about my product or the new products that they need. But as we mentioned before, you're going outbound, the object's not in motion. So you have to find a piece of value. And what I mean by that is something that they didn't know about themselves to mobilize them to actually buy. So if you find a misdiagnosis for your buyer, you help your buyer and you prevent them from doing something that is potentially dangerous to them. If you find and sometimes you create new buyer intent. If you find a misdiagnosis though, you always create more buyer intent. So people solve based on the size of the problem. Tomorrow we're going to go into business problem, tactical problem, root cause, and master problem, and what all of that means. But wait, the punchline is this. They're going to buy based on the size of the problem. The problem I have with that is it's based on the size of the problem that they know about currently. So I want you to imagine, for instance, that the size of the problem is the state of Texas. Pretty big state. That they believe. But the size of the actual problem is the entire United States. They're going to solve and buy and have buyer intent and prioritize budget, timeline, etc., based on the size of Texas. So when I'm rushing in discovery, my ticker, so to speak, kind of like this timer here, is how many unknowns can I find for this person within that 30 minutes. So with that buyer, that's what I was after. I had 10 minutes to dig my foot out of my mouth of why I didn't respond about them being in Paris. Then I had 20 minutes to find things that they didn't know. And I'm like, I got to find some whompers. So how you find all of these, which I know yesterday we talked all about indicators, lagging, leaning, and leading. How you find all of these is by asking questions, not leading questions. What would 10 or 15 more meetings mean to your business per month? For example, do you want to lose weight? Do you want more money? Do you want to be walking down the beach with your 6-pack abs and your soulmate on your side? Not self-diagnosis questions. What's the root cause? What's the impact to you if you don't solve blank? Again, if they knew and they're correct, there was no point to you being on that call. But you should instead ask questions about their indicators in specific. So I want to see if anyone is still awake out there and play along. I heard a cold call with an influencer at one point. They were teaching everyone how to cold call, whatever. They go through with this prospect, and the prospect says, our program's doing all right, but our open rate's pretty bad. And the influencer goes straight through it. They're like, that's what we sell for. Here over at blank, we help with blank, 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 blank. And this was a broadcast to teach you how to cold call. I about threw my computer out the window. So I'm going to see if anyone can guess it. This prospect said, we have an okay program. Our program's doing all right, but we have a pretty bad open rate. What's the next question that seller, that influencer should have asked? They said, our program's doing all right, but we have a pretty bad open rate. What is the next question that you would need to figure out to be able to find something that they didn't know? I'm going to give everyone about 15 seconds in the chat. But when I'm after finding one of these two, I'm after asking very objective questions. What is the time of day that you're sending your emails to find? Are they sending them at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which is the worst time to send it? Or the demo request process. I don't ask them the question, do you have a demo request problem? I ask the questions of, do you round robin your leads? What happens whenever they request a demo on the weekend? How are they pursuing them? Over email? And when they get them over the on the line, what are the types of questions that they ask? And they'll be like, oh, well, it's about, level of authority and need. And I'm like, are they bank questions? So I know when I'm asking those questions, yeah, Min nailed it. The question should have been, the prospect said, we have a pretty bad open rate. Influencer's next question should have been, what is the open rate? Good to them is not good to you necessarily. Good to them is not necessarily good according to industry average. Not a little low open rate doesn't help me diagnose if there's an email deliverability problem. An actual open rate helps me diagnose an email deliverability problem. So my push to you, if you want to find value for your buyer, if you want to actually add to the conversation, and if you want to make sure that they want you and they want to call next, their first litmus test is the first 5 minutes of that discovery and the cold call. So ask questions about their indicators and find things that they didn't know, and they will want to give you more time. I promise you. That is everything. Thanks so much for watching. So little summary here, and then I'm going to let everyone go. So today was how to find problems for your buyers and that will actually close deals. So now I'm seeing some questions come in. Questions come in here. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag. So the 4 pieces were find unknowns for your buyer. The second piece was on a misdiagnosis, something they believe it's not true. The third was on a misdiagnosis, something they've missed entirely. And the fourth was on value defined. Those 2 pieces, an unknown, misdiagnosis, and misdiagnosis, are the value to your buyer. So if you're sitting out there and watching this, or if you're watching in a replay, I'm going to challenge you with this. How many problems can you find for your buyer right now in discovery that they didn't know about? And if that number is anything less than 3, then I'm going to push you to start researching your buyer. CrowdStrike had one of the biggest outages in history. And I guarantee everyone wants to sell to them now. But where were the sellers before? Why did no one catch that? Why didn't they ask them about the code database? Were they reusing existing code? How many developers did they have? How many beta tests had they gone through? How had they QA'd it? If you asked those questions, you could have sized up for CrowdStrike before CrowdStrike hit the outage, before Becc sees the wrong script when she's live, before this impact happens, before this terrible thing hits them. That is where a real seller lives. I don't want my buyer to go into pain. I want to prevent that pain from happening. If nothing else, make them aware that very likely, if they stay as is, they're going to have to run into something they didn't know. So find those unknowns, and I promise you, your buyers will take care of you in terms of closed won. That's it. Thank you so much for coming. Happy Sunday to everyone. Here's the real life Olympics. I think that's biking, or I don't even know what it is. So I'm not going to any events today, but I will be tuning in. There's a number of different events. So if you want to tune in tomorrow, we're going to be doing tomorrow 3 p.m. CET on problems, business problems, tactical problems, root causes, what does a buyer want to solve, et cetera, et cetera. So as always, you know what, I'm going to be cheesy and pretend that I'm French and say, à bientôt, merci pour tout, au revoir pour maintenant, pour tout de suite, and I will see you tomorrow. Au revoir, everybody.